It will be nice if you switch on the camera, students. Aditya, Srinidhi, Spandana, Sujay, Sanjay. Switch on the camera, please. All of you. Mahita, Pallavi.
Morning, Saikesh. How are you doing? You're on mute.
I'm good, sir. How are you, sir?
It's actually a very enjoyable moment when you tell people you're on mute.
Yes, sir.
How are things? All good?
Yes, sir. Online classes are going on for our students.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Morning.
Aditya, do you have friends who are in this meeting?
What?
No, I'm asking Aditya if he has friends who are in this meeting, if he can somehow get them to turn on their cameras.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Text your friends, tell them that their cameras have to be turned on.
Okay.
It's not even so early where people will be in bed and sort of not prepared to turn on their camera. It's not an unreasonable ask at 11.
Not, yeah, I know, but unfortunately, we have also been struggling with getting people to switch on their cameras. Padmalata madam, since everybody sort of looks up to you as a, mentor, can you sort of talk to them, please?
Sure, sir. Sure. Switch on the camera, please. Chirag. It will be nice if all of you switch on the camera. Chirag, inform the students, your fellow friends, to switch on the camera. Quick.
Also, I understand that some number of students are attending a placement drive. So obviously they will not be around. We will start off, madam, give it another about 4-5 minutes and then start off. The session can be recorded and we will sort of then share it with them. So
Yes.
let's not keep Professor Srinath waiting indefinitely. Padmalata madam, I think, are we good to go?
Yes, sir. We'll start the session.
Maybe it's 10, 10:08 for my watch. So
11:05.
yeah, we have 52 people. I think it's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, let's start off.
Yes.
Madam.
Good morning, dear students, respected Dean, SCMS PG program, Associate Director, Dayanand Sagar Business School, and the speaker of the event, Professor Samudyata Srinath. A very warm welcome to all of you. We are honored to have Samudyata Srinath as the speaker of the day. She has incredible credentials and we are proud she's one among us at DSU. Professor Samudyata Srinath is currently Associate Director and Associate Dean Academics at the upcoming DSU School of Law. She has a law degree from O.P. Jindal Global University and a master's in social anthropology from the University of Oxford. She's speaking about sexual harassment at the workplace. This session will be largely an informal conversation around the possible kinds of sexual harassment one can experience in the workplace. The speaker will speak on the different manifestations of sexual harassment and the mechanism and behavior required to make the workplace a safe place for everyone. She will also explain some general rules around good workplace etiquette to get a sense of what the appropriate boundaries are in a working environment. Now I request the Dean, SCMS PG program, to give the opening remark for this event.
Yeah,
Over to you, sir.
thank you so much, madam, and won't take much time. But I just want to tell our students here, first of all, thanking Professor Samudyata Srinath for agreeing to do this brief talk on sexual harassment as well as harassment in general, which by nature is distasteful. But unfortunately, humans have a tendency to do distasteful things. And it's very important because many of our students are young people. They may not have a full understanding of the purport of harassment in general and sexual harassment in particular. So this brief session is to make you aware that something like this exists for both the sexes, male and female, who are going out for internship opportunities, placement opportunities, or faculty who may or may not have an idea of this particular malice. So once again, thank you to Professor Srinath for agreeing to speak to our students and faculty. I also have got my friend, Professor Dr. Sai Ganesh from Director of DSBS who's here. So thank you, Sai Ganesh, for attending. And let's kick off. And Madam, I understand that this session is being recorded. So for those students who could not make it and who are part of their placement process, please see that it is shared with them and they have a good look at it before they set off on their internship journeys. Thank you so much.
Shall I go ahead? Shall I start?
Yes, Professor, you can
Yeah,
start the session.
so I don't think I've actually had a chance to formally say this, but good morning to everyone. And for the 52 participants, thank you, especially the students. Thank you for showing up. I know it was mandated, but it's still nice of you to be here. One last attempt before we get into it. If you feel so inclined to turn on your cameras over the course of this session, please do so. It would be nice to see your faces, since I don't think we're ever going to get a chance to meet in person given the way the pandemic is going. So some interaction this way. I wanted to preface this by saying that it is going to be an informal session. And the reason I say this is because, like I was saying earlier, I'm hoping to receive a fair amount of conversational input from your end. Okay, so just before we get into details, legal definitions and things like that, what do we as a group feel or know about sexual harassment? Where are we at in terms of what is our understanding? What are our feelings about it? Does anyone want to volunteer and give some? What have we heard? Especially the students, you would have definitely come across it in the last 2 years. The Me Too movement blew up on social media. It was largely centered around sexual harassment in the workplace. And then there was all of the criticisms of the Me Too movement from various quarters. So what is the sense? What do we feel?
It's a menace. It's menacing.
But what would it be, sir? Would you have any idea what it would look like when we say sexual harassment? We know it's a terrible thing. Nobody wants to be subject to it. No one wants to subject other people to it. But what could sexual harassment possibly look like? Do we have any idea? What are the concerns around it? What are the feelings it brings up?
This is Srinivasan here. Hello, ma'am. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Please tell me.
Yeah, it's happening, but people are not willing to come forward to report it. It's a problem.
It's happened. That's actually a good point, which we will talk about in terms of institutional address and reporting. I'm just gonna write it down to come back to it. But anything else? There's a few students here. I would love to start randomly calling out people. I thoroughly enjoy it, but does anyone want to volunteer before I start calling people out?
So Mr. Srinivasan is also a student. He is not a faculty. Huh?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
This is Professor Alok here. Just a second.
Yes.
You know, this would also happen when there are some power differences, positional differences, and people feel vulnerable that, you know, there are some, I mean, somebody can take advantage of me. So those are the settings that set the stage for any form of exploitation, including sexual exploitation.
You're absolutely right. I mean, it does at the end of the day come down to a difference in power between the two people or how many ever people involved in the equation. Let me rephrase the question if perhaps this question is too broad. Of the people, how many encountered some form of a Me Too movement post over the last year? Do we know what I'm talking about when I talk about the Me Too movement? Because
May
if
not,
we're not familiar with it, I'll
they may not
abandon it.
be. They may not be aware, you know, what exactly is the Me Too movement, and may or may not. I'm not sure.
No,
but-
which is perfectly okay. That's sort of the sense that I'm trying to get. Chirag, since you so enthusiastically volunteered to turn on your camera, would you like to volunteer to answer this question as well?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, the knowledge which I have up to the Me Too movement, it was started from a in cinema industry, and then it turned all over India and world, across the world and all. It was a harassment done by the superiors, higher authorized people to a junior or a junior kind of a employees. So that's what it is.
You're right. That was the answer. You could have volunteered without my forcing you to participate. Essentially, the Me Too movement has reignited the conversation about sexual harassment in the workplace, which is why I bring it up. It started in Hollywood. It centered around Harvey Weinstein, who's a very famous Hollywood producer. And a lot of very, very established famous actresses began to come out with the forms of abuse they were subject to while having to work with this person. Okay, he was later convicted on these charges, one of the only people of high profile to get sort of taken to task by the legal structures. But from that Hollywood framework, the Me Too movement as a hashtag and on social media began to spread across the world. And the hashtag essentially became a way for a lot of women to start talking about their experiences with sexual harassment in the workplace. And the reason that this was a powerful hashtag is because it was the first. So we all know how hashtags work, right? If you use a hashtag, it collects all the information sort of put out under that hashtag in one place. It became the first time that there was such a global and public conversation about the forms of harassment women face. Now, the Me Too movement was very women-centric, right? It was actually very cis woman-centric for the most part. But we will speak within the framework of this context to begin with, and then talk about the ways in which this can get problematized moving on. Now, as it was very rightly said at the beginning, when we talk about sexual harassment, especially in the workplace, the key thing to look for is a power differential. And the very obvious way in which this power differential plays out, the most obvious form of it, is in terms of the hierarchy of the institution, right? If somebody is a boss and someone is a person's employee, there is a difference in power. And this difference in power goes on to impact how effectively a person can say no without it leading to any adverse consequences, whatever that may mean. That can even mean something as simple as being socially ostracized within the office. Right? That's the one very obvious and direct way in which a power differential plays out. However, power dynamics manifest themselves in a lot more ways than just boss-employee or professor-student dynamics. Power dynamics can manifest even among peers based on different factors of their identity. For example, say identities around gender. This creates a sense of power dynamics, which is why often when you talk about sexual harassment in a very sort of watered down way, it says, oh, women get harassed and men harass, which is not a true statement. It's not that men can't be subject to sexual harassment, but given the way that society is largely set up and the fact that men have more social capital within the framework of society, the tendency is that the harassment flows in this direction. So while it is not an absolute true statement, women do face harassment more than men do because of the dynamics of power that are set up in society. Okay. This is not, again, and I'm prefacing this because it's an important point. This is not to say that every man is walking around with the intention of sexually harassing a woman just because he is a man in society. That is not what I am saying. But what can be seen as an innocent statement when injected into this imbalanced power dynamic can result in the person receiving that statement to feel really uncomfortable. Okay. In a nutshell, sexual harassment is not so much about intent, it's about the impact. So it is not about what you intended for that statement to mean. It is about how that statement was perceived by the person receiving it. And that perception is colored by this power dynamic that we're talking about. Now, power dynamics can also happen in other ways. It's not just gender. It can happen along the lines of class. It can happen along the lines of caste. It can happen along the lines of sexual orientation. It can happen along the lines of whether you're cisgender or transgender or non-binary, like all of these markers of your identity and how much value society places on these markers, that sets up the dynamic of power. All of this to say that it's not just your superiors or your bosses who can sexually harass you. It can even be a peer. To flip it, statements you make may not be perceived as sexual harassment only if it's made to an inferior. It can also be perceived this way by a peer if they have less power than you in the overall dynamic. This sounds very broad, this sounds really scary. Anything can be sexual harassment. What do we do? After the Me Too movement, there were a lot of very famous Hollywood actors who came out and said, oh, this has gone too far. We can't even speak to women now. What do we do? How do we go about this? Women think everything is harassment. The world is collapsing. And the answer is no, it's actually quite simple. It's not this up in the air. Now, especially when it comes to the workplace, it helps all of us, regardless of whether we're male, female, straight, anything else, binary, non-binary, all of these things, to follow a few basic rules, right? We don't make personal comments towards our colleagues, right? We don't ask personal questions of our colleagues. We don't comment on appearance when it comes to our colleagues. And this is actually an interesting one in the Indian workplace context, because it's very culturally acceptable for us to comment about how people look, especially in the workplace. And it's almost seen as a positive thing, right? Your professors walk in and say, oh, you look so nice today, or things like that. And the interesting way in which this manifests is often because of, again, how society is set up, right? We comment about appearance more to women than we do men. Women are more at the receiving end of these comments. And while it's perfectly okay for you to tell your friend that they look nice, maybe just reserve these comments when it comes to your colleague. Or instead of making it a generalized appearance, if you like the blazer they're wearing, tell them, oh, hey, nice blazer, as opposed to, oh, you look so nice today. Can't get over how nice you look today. Oh my God, walk by again, you look so nice today. I mean, statements like this, inappropriate in a workplace. This is obviously a rule of thumb. If you're best friends with your colleague, you can tell them whatever you two have decided is acceptable between the two of you. But in general, in a workplace, comments like this, not the most invited, right? Not the most acceptable. Another very common form of sexual harassment that doesn't get registered as sexual harassment is actually staring. And before having this talk with you, I went through a few sort of reports that had been filed by various organizations that conduct training in sexual harassment. And the most common complaint is that my boss stares, I don't know what to do, because nothing is being said. No contact is being made, but they don't look at my face when they talk to me. Right? I'm being perceived more as an object in this space, a sexualized object in this space than a person. So they're not saying anything out of line, they're giving me work instructions, but I'm not being spoken to the way that other colleagues are spoken to, right? So they could be staring at literally any part of your body. The most common complaint that comes from women is that people stare at their breasts or look down their shirts when they're speaking to them, which is a very obvious form of harassment, even though it's not verbal, even though it's not physical. There's no contact, nothing is being said. So really the key thing to remember when it comes to sexual harassment is that there's some implicit form of sexualization that's at play, and it's about impact. So even if you don't intend for a comment to be sexual, but if it can be interpreted that way given various social situations, that could constitute harassment. So best to steer clear of this as a rule. I'm not sure how much of what I'm saying is sort of translating, mostly because lots of you refuse to turn on your camera, so I can't see how confused or not confused you look. But so far, do we have any thoughts on this? Thoughts, concerns?
No, I think it will filter through. So, the purport may not be immediately, because people have got used to looking at things, and to suddenly tell them not to, it may not occur like a flick of a switch, but I'm sure it's registering.
It's such an interesting phrasing you used, Captain. You said that people have gotten used to looking at things. And I think it's a very useful reminder to remember that our colleagues are not things that we look at.
No.
Actually, no, that's a great phrasing. It was good for me to bounce off of, because it's not just our colleagues, right? People around us are not things to look at. And especially in a workplace, someone is there to do a particular task. They're not an ornamental object. So best to steer clear of this sort of.
No. When I said things, I don't want to get into a discussion and steal your show. We've got limited time. When I said things, I did not mean human beings. I meant body parts.
No, I assumed that's what you meant. And I was reminding that the part is attached to a person, sort of.
Probably so. I did not want to use the anatomy of the part or name it. I just referred to as a thing, and we all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no. It was just a good bouncing off point as a reminder of why not to do that. Yeah. I had a question, which I'm not sure if it's going to. Okay. So at this point, all of you are master's students, largely. The people here, they're all MBA students, right? Yes. So you're all a master's students. And I'm guessing if you have something you want to contribute to this conversation, because it's not a new or alien concept. Anyone who's been to the workplace has experienced some form of slightly uncomfortable behavior, even if it's not sexual harassment. So I just want to clarify that before I briefly told you how the law looked at the matter.
Okay.
Mr. Raghavendra Sharma, can you mute unless you have something to say?
Okay.
Ma'am, this is Surbhi Swain. I want to ask a question. Generally, add to the professor question, generally when somebody come, man or female or male, somebody immediately look and they is other person feel that they're scanning, but it's a normal look. If you check somebody, they feel they're check out me, but reality is that they're just looking you because of somebody is coming and unintentionally, the sense you just see that person, and maybe this person habit or many times we felt that colleague is looking like they have bad intention, but in reality I don't feel from heartily that is a bad intention, but other my colleagues feel that they look at us like other intentional, but personally if I feel from my heart it is not. But that's in scenario people used to tell that person is bad, is looking at badly. So how you feel your thought on that, my question is.
So there's actually many things that you bring up in your question. The first answer is, if you are subject, if this person is looking at you and you don't feel that the way they're looking at you is sexualizing you, no one else can define that, because at the end of the day, sexual harassment is about perception. Second, it becomes very difficult for us to establish what is intent, what is not intent in this case. And sexual harassment is not like an IPC crime where you have to establish mens rea, which is the intent, state of mind. So when you say, oh, it's just habit, I think everyone who's gathered here, because we're socialized into society, can tell the difference between someone just looking at you because you walk in and someone scanning you head to toe. Looking at someone as they walk in, perfectly okay. Looking someone up and down when they walk in, even if it's habit, is possibly a habit one should break, right? Because in a social context, the way that we understand scanning is more than just looking at a person. So if you are not uncomfortable with being looked at up and down and you think that person is that's just how that person looks, then that's probably the case, because you're in that social situation, you are in the best position to read it. And no one else can tell you how to experience or label your experience. That being said, if somebody else was looked at this way and that person felt uncomfortable and they came to you and said, oh, I feel uncomfortable with the way that that person looks at me, similarly, you can't tell them, no, you're just imagining it, that's just how they are. Because if something that a person is doing is making other people uncomfortable, it's worth having a conversation to just change that behavior from that, right? Regardless of intention. Because if the person who is doing this scanning, if they have no intention of making people uncomfortable, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to change that so that they stop making people feel uncomfortable. This holds true for all of us, right? You're in a classroom and your professor has a way of saying something that doesn't make you feel very comfortable. Speak to them and they'd be more than happy to accommodate that, because the goal is to make sure that you are comfortable. So no one who doesn't have the intention of causing discomfort is going to mind when you say, can you please not do this? I don't appreciate it. You know, I was talking earlier about comments about personal appearance, and I come back to this example a lot because it's actually quite normalized in Indian workplaces to comment about appearance. And often it is not said with a sexual intent. Often it's just said because we understand that it's okay to speak to people like that. So using myself as an example, I don't appreciate, I'm just going to come to that question. I don't personally care for comments about appearance. So if that comes up in conversation, I'm not going to assume anything on part of that person's intention. I'm just going to clearly say, can we not make these comments? I don't appreciate them. And 9 out of 10 times, people are more than happy to respect that boundary that you draw. So I'll come back to this point about the boundary drawing very briefly, but we have a question. Would you want to contribute to this? Devapriya, did I say your name right? Sorry, you're muted.
I'm sorry for that. My question is 2 parts. One is, I'm part of a group, say 10 members in an organization. And suppose I have a friend and she has been a victim of sexual harassment. Now, in the Indian context, she's reluctant to discuss this, except for a couple of her very good friends. Now, my question is, what should she be doing? What is the rightful thing for her to do? Second part is, we as peers, how can we help her? So now this is a scenario when I'm working in a group. Now the third thing what I want to also ask is, suppose a lady walks into a new corporate to attend an interview, and she faces a similar thing with the interviewer. What should she be doing? If you can help us understand the best practices around this as a victim of a sexually harassed, that will be helpful.
It's actually, I'm so happy you asked this question. So thank you for asking this question, because, and I'm going to answer your question, the many questions that you raised slightly out of order, if that's okay. So I will
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
arrange the questions, right? You know, we talk about sexual harassment, we've talked about what it is, we've talked about how to possibly identify it. And normally this is where the conversation ends. But a really important part of this conversation is what can the rest of us do if someone feels like they have been subject to sexual harassment? In other words, if someone has been subject to sexual harassment, right? Because it is more about feeling than about anything else. Now, which is why it's such a great question. So again, thank you for asking it. The first thing that is important for all of us to remember, and this ties back to the comment that was made earlier that cases don't get reported, is that collectively as a society, we have a tendency to dismiss. We have a tendency to dismiss anything that makes us even remotely uncomfortable. So conversations about sexual harassment are obviously right up there on the levels of discomfort, but anything, sexism, casteism, littering on the streets, we dismiss it as a problem. And so the first thing that we as a group of people or a group of peers should do is fight this urge to say, oh no, you're imagining it. No, that person is harmless. Yeah, they're a bit of a creep, but I don't think they're really harmful, because the being a creep in itself is the harm, right? Physical comments, you know, looking at someone in a sexualized way, that in itself is the harm. It doesn't have to be explicit. It doesn't have to be physical. It doesn't have to be, oh, you know, you want this promotion, you have to sleep with me. It does not have to go to that level. Because if someone is constantly being singled out in this way and made to feel uncomfortable, that entire workplace becomes a toxic environment for them. So the harm is already done, even if the action doesn't seem intense. So the first most important step is to be a validating peer group, right? Sit with the person. Do not dismiss what they're feeling. Do not say, oh, maybe you're imagining it. No, that person's a good person. I know them, etc., etc. And the second slightly controversial point that I'm going to make is that you can't force anyone to decide how to navigate their experience. And that also includes, maybe it's not always the best idea to push someone into reporting sexual harassment. By all means, bring it up. By all means, encourage it. Let them know that you will sort of stand by them should they choose to report it. But if a person decides that they don't want to seek institutional redress, that is something that we have to respect. Why do I say this? Because, I mean, this is not a statistic you can quote me on, but in a majority of the cases, complaints of sexual harassment do not see any meaningful redressal. Okay, it is actually fantastic that DSU is doing this, and I want to take a minute to congratulate the faculty team of the management school for doing this, because this is actually very rare. It's very rare for an institution to say, okay, let's have a conversation with our students about possible forms of sexual harassment they can encounter in the workplace. And if this happens, we will stand by them. And the fact that this in itself is rare tells you why people are not the most enthusiastic about reporting complaints. Because you have to go through the discomfort of talking about something that made you uncomfortable to no end. To have a person with authority dismiss it. So given the various situations, maybe this may not be the case. Maybe you're part of an organization where everyone takes this very seriously. But the decision of whether or not to report and pursue this through a disciplinary channel entirely lies with the person who has experienced it. So as peers, all we can do is be supportive of whatever decision they make. But the most important thing that we need to do is not dismiss their experience. I might have had the most phenomenal experience with person A, their interactions with me where they're super respectful, but if somebody else has felt disrespectful, don't dismiss, don't not believe. Because that's what creates this silence. That's what allows people to get away with a lot of bad behavior. So that was one part of your question, right? What do we do when this happens and when this person doesn't want to report? Because like you rightly identified in your own question, the way that Indian society is set up, it's not always in a person's benefit to report sexual harassment. Now, the second question you ask is a little bit more complicated. Now, if you're in an interview and your interviewer makes you uncomfortable, there's a few things you need to assess for yourself. Now, I can't say, oh, get up and walk away. That's a very privileged statement to make. Not everyone has this ability to get up and walk away from interviews that make you uncomfortable. You could perhaps test the waters a little bit. If you feel so comfortable, you could politely say, can we just talk about something else? Redirect the conversation. If the interviewer is persistent in making you uncomfortable, then I would urge you to explore possibly speaking to somebody else about that interview. So say, if it's, oh, I only know the framework of a law firm, which won't apply here. Okay, so maybe you could just have a very brief conversation with another manager. Maybe you can just walk into HR and check with them if this is something that's okay or not okay. But at the end of the day, if the interviewer at an interviewing stage has made you feel uncomfortable, and if you're in a position to reevaluate whether or not you can work there, then please do that, because it's very telling, right, of a place where at the entry level, you're being made to feel uncomfortable. And you have to work there, you have to go there every day. But I understand that not everyone has this option. So the very small thing that we can do in this situation is redirect the conversation, or explicitly say, not confrontationally, but just say, please, can we not have this conversation? It's making me uncomfortable. You'll be surprised how many people back off behavior patterns when you clearly say, we're not having this conversation. So that's sort of a possible thing that can be done. There's no best practices, unfortunately. We have a law in place. We have the POSH Act, which was passed in 2013, Prevention of Sexual Harassment in the Workplace. But the POSH Act is very limited in terms of its scope. It only recognizes sexual harassment if it happens to women. And luckily for us, despite some very narrow definitions, the last part of the section, which is section 2N of the POSH Act, which is what defines what sexual harassment is, the last part says, any other unwelcome physical or non-physical behavior characteristics of a sexual nature, behavior attributes of a sexual nature. So it can cover anything. So staring is covered under this, all of that. So really, if you don't want to work there and the interviewer has made you too uncomfortable, just report them under the POSH Act. If nothing else, you'll create some inconveniences for the company, and they might reassess how or who does the interviews moving forward. Now, when I was talking, the last part of the description that I sort of sent in about this talk, and we have just enough time to do it, is a conversation about workplace etiquette. Because see, at the end of the day, very few of us go into the workplace with either the intention of being nobody goes into a workplace with the intention of being sexually harassed. And very, very few people go into the workplace with the intention to sexually harass. So in this situation, what are some of the ways in which we can be mindful of our behavior to clearly demarcate what is and is not acceptable forms of communication? I say this and I want to caveat. There is very little a person who is on the receiving end of sexual harassment can do to not receive it. Right? The only way we prevent sexual harassment is to prevent people from sexually harassing. So if you're at the receiving end of anything that makes you uncomfortable, it is not your fault. There is nothing you could have done differently, because it is with the person who has the power to decide not to blur these lines. I also want to remind everyone that up until now, I have not said only women are at the receiving end of sexual harassment. That's what the POSH Act says, and that's one of the limitations of the law. Right? So it is not that if you are a man in a workplace, you cannot be subject to sexual harassment, because ultimately it comes down to dynamics of power, like I said earlier. So it is just in everyone's benefit that we follow this general sort of thing, and you have to amend it to your workplace and your personality and your temperament. Obviously, there's no written rule. So one of the things that comes up a lot as a way to just prevent uncomfortable communications is to restrict communication timing. If you're working with someone, best not to, unless it's an absolute emergency, text them post 7 o'clock. Right? People that you work with don't need to be receiving texts from you through the night, unless it's an emergency, in which case everyone will understand that it's an emergency. No one is going to interpret it as harassment. Best, if you are working with someone, like I said earlier, best to avoid questions about their personal life. There is no need for your boss to know whom you're dating. There is no need for your boss to know who dropped you off to work that morning. Similarly, there may not be any need for even your colleagues to know these things. Should you choose to offer up this information, that's a different thing, right? Because that will be based on the dynamics that you have with your colleague. But it's not really anybody's place, especially in a working environment, to ask these questions. I say the dating thing, especially in the context of an Indian workplace, seen as a huge taboo, and is often used as a way to sort of shame people even in a workplace. It's nobody's business what you do outside of the workplace. Similarly, don't comment about appearance if you can help it. Avoid this kind of communication. I follow some extra rules that you may not have to. I think it is best to have majority of the work communication via email, because there's a written record. Everyone is clear that way. Everything is above board, because you never know what's being said on a phone conversation. Right? So just small things like this that you can do to make sure that everyone clearly understands the boundaries, the demarcations, etc. Now, the one bit of information I have to give you that's actually very relevant to all of you as you embark on your internships is that should you encounter anything, and I've been sort of told this by the captain when we were talking about this session, should you encounter anything in the workplace that makes you uncomfortable, what should you do? Step one, if you feel comfortable, just tell them, can we please not talk about this? It makes me uncomfortable. Or can we please talk about, can we now not discuss this thing? It makes me uncomfortable. You can clearly set that line. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, what if they're very, like really high up, they're a superior, and you don't feel comfortable telling them, stop talking about this? That's okay. You come back to DSU, and you discuss the matter with both Dr. Premlata and Dr. Shankar. They both, I think, your points of contact for this, and they will be able to guide you in terms of how to move forward. Okay, so there is, luckily for you, a clear framework in place should you encounter something in the workplace. So you just bring it back, discuss it, see what can be done, and that way your experience will be as comfortable as possible. I also want to sort of say again that I was very happy to hear the captain say this. He said, I want our students to know that their safety and their comfort is more important to us than the internship. That's a fantastic stand for you to have an institution take. So please make use of it, feel comfortable to come back, discuss it, because the institution clearly has your back. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, ma'am, I have a question. Actually, we set boundary that many women should do. That I also agree. The question happened that when we set a boundary, we always filter our question and talk, and somehow we are not friendly. When people, what I personally feel, the people used to give me feedback, very straightforward. You are in the face, you are telling, and we are scared to speak with you, because what will come back as a bounce back, like that they used to tell, and they're not friendly. And I sometimes got feedback, you should be friendly, you should be friendly. So I don't know what type of friendly you want, expert, I don't understand. So that was an issue happened me, and it is a feedback by my colleague, my friend, and that scenario happened. You set a boundary is a problem. You won't set boundary, you feel sexual harassment, that I know. So that's why my college time also I faced like people not speak with me, but not dare to misbehave with me. But they also give this feedback for whole life. I got this feedback my whole life that you are quite straightforward and you should keep filter and speaking, not hurting people emotion. If I won't hurt your emotion, you'll hurt my emotion. So this is the suggestion I want to know. This is my personal question.
No, that's a great experience. And actually, a lot of my personal experience aligns with that. And I'm sure most of the women in this room can say their personal experience aligns with that. Because when women assert themselves, they're told, oh, be rude, you're hurting my feelings. Say it gently, smile more. And, that's just the unfortunate outcome of some of the ways in which sexism plays out. Men are not told to be nicer. They're allowed to be intimidating. It's seen as a positive thing for men, but for women, it's a horrible thing. I think your approach of saying, my boundaries matter more than whether they see me as nice or not is the right way to go, because you stand to lose more when you don't assert a boundary. So if someone's feelings are hurt that you didn't like, that you told them you didn't like what they said, then that's okay. They just won't say it again. And another person's hurt feelings are their business. We can all deal with our hurt feelings on our own. It's not anyone else's responsibility to manage another person's feeling. So please don't worry about being perceived as unfriendly if you draw a boundary. If you feel like that's what you need to do in that moment to be safe, please prioritize that. And whether or not the person you're drawing the boundary with sees you as unfriendly or not after that is their problem. I know that's not an answer to your question, but there's unfortunately no solution. Like you said, whether you do it or not, you're caught in a bind, and that's just how it sort of plays out. We have some more hands raised. I think Miss Malati had her hand raised. Not sure.
No, not me.
Okay. There was a raised hand. I couldn't figure out where it was from. Okay. Mr.
Devapriya. Devapriya.
Samudyata, Devapriya is having a query, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you, madam. And ma'am, I just relating one of the real-time situations, and I just thought if you can share some of your ideas, thoughts, how to tackle the situation. Going by the POSH law, every corporate has to have a team when a case is registered, and this is the team that questions both the victim and the someone who has done the fault. And usually one of the situation what we encounter is like, a manager, when we question the manager about the situation, the answer is, it's a part of my motivation to look into the eyes. So this are some innovative ways which we see happening at a workplace. And then
could you repeat that? I didn't hear it.
I will tell you.
What did the manager say?
The manager would say, it's a part of my motivation process. So I'm actually not steering, but it's a part of my motivation process. That's how I work with my team. But we know for sure the team that the lady was uncomfortable in an uncomfortable situation. Quite often we have seen. Later on, what we see is that ultimately down the lane, 1 quarter or 2 quarter, somewhere her performance is really down and she's no more into the team. Since you can relate this with the law, just a help from you, how do we tackle such situations? Because I know that manager is at fault.
Then the person needs to be possibly let go of. Because if your manager is coming to a hearing, a sexual harassment committee hearing, and saying, oh, it's just part of my motivation to objectify my female employees, that's an admission of guilt.
Okay.
Because the act clearly says that it's any kind of conduct, implicit or explicit, that can be perceived as being sexual.
Okay.
It's about the impact.
Okay.
So if the manager is unable to motivate themselves without sexualizing their employees, then they're not a fit for the workplace. That's a clear admission of guilt.
Particularly the steering part of it, that's what we hear every time. That's what we encounter.
Yeah. Because that is sexualization. No, why is the staring motivation if it's not sexualization? That's actually, you have an easy case then. They've admitted that they sexually harass their employees.
Sure, ma'am. Got you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Was there another question?
There's no question, but I wanted to share an observation.
Please do.
Yeah, Devapriya, this, this is generally for you. So there's this colleague, a friend of mine who worked in the US at a very large consulting company. And she was telling me about an incident that happened to her, where in a particular meeting, she once said, how come that pretty girl has not come? So this was a lady who was commenting on another lady. And her boss was very upset. Her boss was a male who was very upset and said that, why did you refer to that lady as a very pretty lady? Simply because you might be implying that other ladies are not pretty. So I think, with due respect to everything, I think some amount of common sense also prevails, and it's good judgment to exercise common sense.
Got you, sir.
I mean, but I think that's actually why it's about impact and not intention, because common sense automatically becomes the filter about whether or not I'm perceiving something as harassment or not.
True. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Totally. But that, while I'm cognizant of what is harassment, what is not harassment through my experience, and I was only trying to convey to Devapriya that eventually you also need to get work done while respecting many boundaries. And there are perceptions, there are thoughts, there are people might object to something on one day, they may not object to it the same thing on another day. So it's all fine, but at some point, I think intent is important. And if I'm being told that, I'm sorry if I tell you something and it's just bad luck, then I think it applies to the other set as well, in a sense. And if you're not, like Survi Swain said, that, if somebody is just looking and not checking you out, that can also, I'm sure that also men are checked out many times. So whom
No, but which is why sexual harassment is a gender neutral.
it's a gender, yeah, but the law says it's the Women's Sexual Harassment Act or bill or whatever. So it is not gender neutral in that sense.
It is not in the law. It is as a phenomena. You're absolutely right. The law has a lot of limitations when it comes to protecting people against sexual crimes. Even our rape laws are very gender specific, which is not a reflection of how it works in society.
Yeah. Okay.
That being said, the reason that I prioritized so much on the impact, not the intention, is because I want students to know that they don't have to keep second guessing the intention of a person making them uncomfortable.
True.
They just need to recognize that they are being made to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then bring it to us and we will take it from there. Because if it's a miscommunication, when you speak to that person, they'll be more than happy to rectify their behavior, because no one intends to make another person feel uncomfortable. So the way to scan whether you're being put in a situation that's not good for you is to just check how you feel in that situation, and how to move forward from there. Come back, speak to any of us, we'll figure it out. Would anyone want to add any? We have 4 minutes left.
I am A.G. Krishnan. I am 66 years. I had both teaching and professional experience. And are we exceptions? Are we generalizing? Only one question. Because as if all of us are falling into this particular, that I may not agree. In my teaching career.
Sorry, sir, could you repeat the question?
See, are we generalizing an exception?
What is the exception?
All men are I will not say perverted. That means there is a harassment emanating from each person. Can we?
No,
So
we can't say that.
We are not generalizing.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. That's why I started this by saying that it's not that only women are subject to harassment.
No. Even not. I'm not telling even women. Even the men folk, when 80% of us are very decent in our behavior, deportment, everything, by putting this perspective, it appears as if all of us are part of this.
No, sir, I would actually, I would rephrase that. It is because 80% of us are very, very decent
Yeah.
that it helps all of us who don't want to make someone else uncomfortable know how to not do that.
Thank you.
Because like the captain said, sometimes it could just be a misunderstanding. And I want the people who work with me to feel comfortable. So I'm going to just check myself. I'm going to make sure I don't say certain things that can be misunderstood.
Thank you.
Which is not to say misunderstandings never happen, but there are a few things that we can do to sort of make sure that we minimize those.
Sorry for this open question. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I'm not at all suggesting that every man walks around with the intention of sexually harassing everyone who's not a man. Not at all.
So I'm guilty of taking away 30 seconds from the lecture, but Professor Krishnan, there was a case many years ago of a German national in Bengaluru offering to take his subordinate out for a cup of coffee, and it became a major issue. And I have commanded German ships, so I know Germans quite well. So the output, the long and short of it was that the gentleman was sent home in disgrace. Now, how would you like to look at this? I mean, he says it was an innocent question. I was going out for coffee. I asked my subordinate whether she would like to come. She made a big ruckus about it. The girl later went on to say that no, some other day I may not have made a ruckus about it. On this particular day, I didn't like it. And I complained about it. So, so a little bit of a gray area, but I think the point is well taken that if somebody feels uncomfortable, they ought to speak up about it. And the purport of this lecture was to tell our students that something like this exists, and please reach back to us if you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, Professor Samudhyata, with your permission, can I add something?
Please do.
Yeah, I would like to share some experience or other instances in my earlier work experience. Like in one of the organization where few expats had come and they were working here. They were working in Bangalore, to be precise. And it so happened that one of the expats hugged one of our female colleagues. So finally it became a very big issue. Okay. So, I mean, both ways, though it was a very innocent kind of expression, that was one instance. Then the second instance, in one of the in a different organization, one of the national meetings where all the people in Delhi, everybody had come. One national, the top leader started talking about one particular female colleague, saying that you're very beautiful, because of your business will happen, and all that. That conversation kept on extending for nearly, and it became very obvious. Okay. Then there was another instance. I'm just mentioning out the instances so that you can collate and let us say, suggest what's the best way to handle in a similar situation. There was this senior manager who kept on insisting on going on a joint field work with only one female junior. Okay. This again, all these are very live cases, nothing, have not created it, but I would want your inputs on how these can be handled. So that will give a kind of, the inkling of how our intern students, if they face anything, can go ahead and,
There's two sort of separate cases here, and it's really interesting that the captain mentioned that example, because that's actually something that played out in my previous workplace. We had, I think, an American professor whose TA misunderstood. They're saying, okay, no, we'll discuss class notes over coffee, just come over for coffee. And they were just like, how can I be invited? And it was a cultural clash, if you will. So in that particular instance, because this culture clash happens not just between people who are foreign nationals and Indians, it can happen very well within among Indian people as well. And this is where I think that dynamic of power that I mentioned earlier is a good rule of thumb to look at. If I am going into a situation with more power, and this can just manifest in the form of social capital, right? If I'm a superior, if I am a white man in a non-white country, all of these markers of power, it kind of becomes a consequence of that power that I need to do a little bit of the groundwork. So for, say, white people or like Anglo-European, culturally socialized people to come into an Indian context, there does have to be a certain amount of them having to do a little work of what is and what is not acceptable here. Europeans greet each other by kissing each other on the cheek twice. That's just how people greet each other in Europe. That won't work here. And there needs to be some amount of having done that research before you enter, because you're the one coming in with the power in this equation. On the other hand, the other two examples that you mentioned, Dr. Shankar, where this person went on and on about a particular colleague's beauty and how that was somehow essential, that is just straight up inappropriate by all cultural metrics of professionalism. So that was a very straight cut thing. I think if the female colleague who's being spoken of was uncomfortable, it would be a clear-cut case of inappropriate workplace behavior. The third thing, if that female junior that the person wanted to keep going on field work with, if that woman was made to feel uncomfortable, then it becomes a situation of possible harassment. And the way that the institution can intervene is just not allowing that field work to happen. If that lady had no problem with it, maybe they were just jointly working on a project, maybe he was a supervisor for that project. I really don't know the dynamic. We can't assume, but it really comes down to whether or not all parties are comfortable. If all parties are not comfortable, then there needs to be a looking into why. And the rule of thumb is if you come into a situation with some measure of power, then it sort of becomes your work to do the work to not make other people uncomfortable. So when I walk into a classroom, it's my responsibility to try and not make my students feel uncomfortable, etc., etc. So it's not about gender, it's not about race, it's about power, and that becomes a good rule of thumb. I think we've sort of covered everything. Are there any questions, comments before we sort of wrap up?
I would like to say that in a similar situation, if any of the student faces, they should be assertive and come and talk to us in case. See, 99% most organizations are very, very, we can say, proactive about it, and it would very serious about these kind of situations. But still, it would not be advisable to keep it to oneself. At least come and express to your to one faculty member. That would be the ideal thing to do. Is what I think.
No, I agree. I think for the student group that's present here, if any of you encounter anything and you're not even sure if it's harassment or not, it doesn't matter. You can bring it back to your faculty and discuss it with them, and they will guide you forward. That's kind of if you have to take away one thing from this long 1-hour conversation, it is that if you're uncomfortable, bring it back and talk about it, because you have people who are willing to have that conversation with you.
Okay, ma'am, last question. So if you go and tell the manager and HR about your something you feel bad, is it like it's not openly they're discussing, it's a big issue, and people every time will look at different way, will go all this. So people scared to speak about their scenario. So if you speak problem, you won't speak problem. So that how you cannot handle yourself. Also, sometimes this type of depression will happen because for some days, the female or male, both case. So that scenario, what will do? Sorry, the last moment I asked again one question.
No, is the question, what do you do when you're uncomfortable reporting?
If you go to HR, then HR will go the senior HR, the senior management. It's like that. The discussion is go so many management and senior people. Then it is the smallly that the secret is not secret. Is everybody knows, but you don't know. Everybody's know. And the final happen. Everybody look at you, discuss about you. Once you pass by or you go somewhere, they're discussing about you. So later, some 1 month, 2 months, you come to know that they're discussing about that sexual harassment thing, and you feel very bad. It's a joke. You are a joke of the office or joke of the institute where you are, and they're discussing about you, and you feel more depressed compared to the sexual harassment. Yeah, that was my question. How to handle?
You've been asking actually very pertinent but very complicated questions through this talk, because like all your questions have rightly identified, sexual harassment doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? It happens in a culture where there is an imbalance in terms of how we perceive men and women, which is why when sexual harassment news becomes office gossip, it is often women who are the fodder for that gossip and not the actual person who carried out the sexual harassment. Why women? Anyone. The person at the receiving end becomes the person who's gossiped about. Now, in terms of secrecy, there are some legal guidelines about confidentiality, but they're never followed. So it really then becomes about, this is not me as a lawyer advising you, this is sort of me speaking informally to you. It becomes about your cost benefit. It becomes, you need to sort of, unfortunately, the unfortunate reality is, should you decide to move forward with a sexual harassment complaint, you do require to prepare, you need to sort of mentally prepare yourself a little bit for some amount of public talk. Which is why the question that was asked earlier and the points we raised about peer support becomes so important. So this is not just, oh, what do I do if I'm subject to sexual harassment? It's also, what can I do if someone I know is subject to it? Because it then becomes really important to know that you have your community behind you, because people are going to talk. And when people talk, they say all sorts of things. Imagination runs wild. That's just the unfortunate reality of living in society. So there's no clear, how do I stop this from happening sort of answer for you, other than maybe we can all work towards just being better peer groups. I know that's not a direct answer to your question, but unfortunately there isn't any.
No, ma'am, thank you. Actually, I got it, how to handle it. I got it, but just want to clarify. Anyway, that is the answer. You should have to handle the scenario. That I got it. Okay,
No, but you don't have to do it alone. The rest of us can also be better about making sure that you don't go through that phase where you're being gossiped about, you know, feeling isolated. All that doesn't have to happen. That's a community decision. So we can all come together and just be more supportive.
Okay, thank you.
So that's what I'm saying. So it's not just about what do I do if I'm subject to, it's also how can I just be better if someone I know is subject to. They're all parts of the same conversation.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Samudita, I want to add something. Professor Rajan. Hi, a fantastic session, and Captain Sir, really thank you for organizing this. I think it's an important conversation that needs to happen very often, you know, so that we build an ecosystem where we support each other and we understand and empathize. I think this is just a starting point, and hopefully we'll keep doing more such sessions. But also, to answer to Surabhi's question, I used to work in an earlier organization, which was an MNC. So they used to have a number which used to be mentioned in all blocks, cafeteria and, you know, common spaces, in desks and all that. So that number employees are supposed to save somewhere. This happens with big organization. I don't know about the smaller ones, the mid-size and all that. So that number is like a toll-free number where you don't need to put your name and everything. You just call and tell them, I have been subjected to this kind of a thing. So this is the person, you know, so this is the person I have identified as, and can you please take an action? So your name will not come anywhere, you know, so it's about the person who you have identified who has done something to you. Okay, whatever the case, whatever it is, it could be the topic that we're talking about. It could be anything. I mean, some sort of, you know, some sort of thing that the other person has done to you, you know, likewise, whatever. So I think it's also important for, you know, anyone, students, when they join a company, they need to know these kind of things. If such things exist, such numbers exist, maybe save it somewhere and keep it, you know, and use it to their, you know, if anything, such things happen. But the point is that we need to build an ecosystem where we really help and support each other and not really make it like a gossip point. I think that's most important, I guess. But fantastic session, and sir, thank you very much for really starting this up. I think it really starts a series of great conversations for the future. Yeah.
Yeah, also I would sort of. I appreciate Surabhi. I've taught her, and she's one with a lot of questions. So there have also been cases where false accusations have been made where none existed, and the military is a good example. You know, some of the most, I can say, stringent investigations that are carried out by the Indian Army or the Navy or the Air Force, and in many cases, unfortunately or otherwise, it's been found that there was no substance in the accusation. They were done for some extraneous reason and so on and so forth. And I would like to believe that these are solid institutions which do their homework well. So I think this is a good understanding for our students. But these are serious issues and they need to be taken with due seriousness. And of course, if people feel uncomfortable, they are encouraged to reach out after some thought, and you know, accusations can have multiple effects on different people. So this was a kind of a session to encourage people to reflect and introspect on several things about where they are going, what they are doing, whom they are going to meet, what do they perceive as comfortable, not comfortable, harassment, not harassment. And the fact of the matter is that you have got faculty here who care for you. So if you feel uncomfortable, do reach out, and maybe we can help in whatever way possible. And I would, of course, like to thank our speaker for the day, Professor Samudyata Srinath, for taking time from her busy schedule and being here, and Professor Padmalata for organizing this so well, and students for attending. So those are my sort of concluding remarks. Unless somebody else has something to say, please feel free.
So I thank for involving me for this wonderful discussion. And this kind of discussions, if it, as Professor Rajan told, frequently if it happens, it will increase the level of awareness of the students. I think one of the major problem is level of awareness for both the parties. If the awareness level is increased, and if the distance is maintained, what is the freedom, what is how the freedom is restricted, this kind of conversations will increase the level of awareness, and slowly this can be removed. This problem can be removed in the workplace.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And Professor Srinath made a very valid point in saying that, you know, the organization culture matters a great deal. Yes. And it's not about belittling people in what they say or so on. So the culture should be supportive for any such issues. And if we can create that kind of a culture, not only where our students are going, but within our own systems, where people feel comfortable to come and work, then I think 90% of the battle is won. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Sai Ganesh.
Yes.
Padmalata, madam, all yours, back to you.
Thank you for the very insightful talk. Before closing this event, here is an announcement for the students of the School of Commerce and Management Studies. If you find sexual harassment at the workplace, at the university, or at the internship workplace, you can either mail or reach either me, that is Professor Padmalata, or Tripta Shankar. And thank you, speaker, and the Dean, School of Commerce and Management Studies PG program, and the Associate Director, DSBS, faculty and administrative colleagues of SCMS PG, and my dear students, for making this event a very wonderful session. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.